Hi everyone, welcome to the part 1 of the Linux Essentials full course provided by Network Elite. I hope you keep watching this course till the end to be ready for your exam. So please subscribe this channel and write down your favorite next IP topic below. In this part, we are gonna familiar with some concepts in Linux environments, including what is an OS, investigating user interfaces, what is a distribution, and embedded Linux systems. So let's start our course. What is an operating system? An operating system provides all the fundamental features of a computer, at least from a software point of view. An OS enables you to use the computer's hardware devices, defines the user interface standards, and provides basic tools that allow applications to run on the computer. The next one is the kernel. What is a kernel? An OS kernel is a software component responsible for managing various low-level features of the computer, including interfacing with hardware devices such as network adapters, hard disks, and so on, and also allocating memory to individual programs, allocating CPU time to individual programs, and the last one is enabling programs to interact with one another. When you use a program, for example a web browser, it relies on the kernel for many of its basic functions. The web browser can communicate with the outside world only by using network functions provided by the kernel. The kernel allocates memory and CPU time to the web browser, without which it couldn't run. Any program you run on a computer relies on the kernel in a similar way. Kernels are not interchangeable. The Linux kernel is different from the Mac OS kernel used in Apple workstations and laptops, and from the Windows kernel used in Microsoft-compatible workstations and laptops. Each of these kernels uses a different internal design and provides different software interfaces for programs to use. Thus, each OS is built from the kernel up and it uses its own set of programs that further define each OS's features. What is a Linux kernel? Linux uses a kernel called Linux. In fact, technically speaking, the word Linux refers only to the kernel. Linux has evolved considerably since that time. Today, it runs on a wide variety of CPUs and other hardware. The easiest way to learn about Linux is to use it on a desktop or laptop PC. Now let's see software components that are used in operating system. Command line shells. Years ago, users interacted with computers exclusively by typing commands in a program, also known as a shell, that accepted such commands. The commands would rename files, launch programs, and so on. Many different shells are available, and which shells are available and popular differ from one OS to another. In Linux, a shell known as a Bourne Again shell or Bash is popular. The next one is graphical user interface. A graphical user interface or GUI is an improvement on the text mode shell. Linux relies on a GUI known as the X window system or X for short. X is a very basic GUI, so Linux also uses desktop environment program suites such as the GNU Object Model Environment or GNOME, or also the K desktop environment or known as KDE to provide a more complete user experience. Next one is the utility program, and modern OSs invariably ship with a wide variety of simple utility programs, calculators, calendars, text editors, disk maintenance tools, and so on. These programs differ from one OS to another. Libraries. Libraries are collections of programming functions that can be used by a variety of programs. For instance, in Linux, most programs rely on a library called libc. Many libraries exist for Linux, which helps enrich the Linux software landscape. And the last one is productivity programs. Major productivity programs, web browsers, word processors, graphic editors, and so on, are the usual reason for using a computer. Although such programs are often technically separate from the OS, they are sometimes associated with certain OSs. The next topic is investigating user interfaces, which divides into two parts. Using a text mode user interface, and as you see in this picture, it's important that you have some grounding in the basic principles of both text modes and graphical user interfaces now. In the past, and even sometimes today, Linux computers booted in the text mode. After the system had completely booted, the screen would display a simple text mode login prompt. Also note that to try a text mode login, you must first install Linux on a computer. Neither the Linux Essentials exam nor this video covers Linux installations. But if you would like to test Linux installation progress, you can check that from the suggested link above on this channel. Some text mode programs take over the display in order to provide constant updates or to enable you to interact with data in a flexible manner. Even if you use a graphical login, you can use a text mode shell inside the window, known as a terminal. With common Linux GUIs, you can launch a terminal program which provides a shell prompt and the means to run text mode programs. The other option is using a graphical user interface. Most users are most comfortable with GUIs than with text mode. Unlike Windows and Mac OS, Linux provides a number of different desktop environments for you to choose from. Which one you use depends on the specific variety of Linux you are using, what software options you selected at installation time, and your own personal preferences. Common choices include GNOME, KDE Plasma, Cinnamon, and XFCE. Now let's get familiar with these options in graphical user interface mode. Program launchers. You can launch programs by selecting them from menus or lists. File managers. Linux provides GUI file managers similar to those in Windows or Mac OS. Third one is Windows controls. You can move windows by clicking and dragging their title bars, resizes them by clicking and dragging their edges, and so on. And the last one is multiple desktops. Most Linux desktop environments enable you to keep multiple virtual desktops active, each with its own set of programs. Okay, have you ever heard about distribution or Linux distros? If not, don't worry, I'll let you know. What is distribution? Many different Linux distributions are available, each consisting of a Linux kernel along with a set of utilities and configuration files. The result is a complete OS, and two Linux distributions can differ from each other. If you are curious about trying out Linux but don't have a dedicated workstation or laptop available, install a virtual machine software package such as VMware or VirtualBox, which allows you to run a Linux operating system inside an existing Mac OS or Windows workstation environment without having to change the system. Also, you can check my channel in order to how to install VMware Workstation 16 on your system. Okay, now after you know what a distribution is, let's see some of the common Linux distributions here. Depending on how you count, there are about a dozen major Linux distributions for desktop, laptop, and small server computers, and hundreds more that serve specialized purposes. This table summarizes the features of the most important distributions. What is availability? Most Linux distributions are entirely open source or free software. However, some include proprietary components and are sold for money, typically with a support contract. Red Hat Enterprise Linux or RHEL and SUSE Enterprise Linux are two most prominent examples of this type of distribution. The next one is package format. Most Linux distributions distribute software in packages, which are collections of many files in one. Package software maintains a local database of installed files, making upgrade and uninstallation easy. The RPM package manager or RPM system is the most popular one in the Linux world, but Debian packages are very common too. Other packaging systems work fine but are distribution specific, such as the Pacman package management system used in Arch Linux. Slackware is unusual in that it uses tarballs for its package. The next is release cycle. As a general rule, distributions with short release cycle aims to provide the latest software possible, whereas those with a longer release cycle strive to provide the most stable environments possible. Okay, now we are going to answer this most common question, that which distribution to use. With the plethora of different Linux distributions available, one of the most often asked questions for novice Linux users is which one to try. Some Linux distributions, such as Red Hat and Oracle, focus on commercial Linux installations, providing paid customer support. These distributions can be expensive, and they are often hard for novice users to install and use. A second type of Linux distributions are those geared toward advanced Linux users. The CentOS, Slackware, and Gentoo Linux distributions fall into this category. They expect you to know how to install and configure most of the software and hardware yourself. Advanced Linux users like to use these distributions because they can customize exactly what to install on the system. The third type of Linux distributions are those geared toward novice Linux users. The popular Fedora, Ubuntu, and Mint Linux distributions fall into this category. The default installation takes care of most of the software and hardware configuration issues you need to worry about, and they all provide a wealth of user-friendly graphical tools for doing administrative functions, such as adding user accounts, exploring disk space, and working with network connections. These types of Linux distributions are the best way to go if you are a novice to the Linux world. Now let's move on to the next topic, embedded Linux system. An embedded system is a microprocessor-based computer hardware system with software that is designed to perform a dedicated function, either as an independent system or as a part of a large system. At the core is an integrated circuit designed to carry out computation for real-time operations. In addition to mainstream PC distributions, several other Linux distributions are available that serve more specialized purpose. Android. Many cell phones today use a Linux-based OS known as an Android. Such phones don't use X or typical desktop applications, though. Instead, they run specialized applications for cell phones. Next one is network appliances. Many broadband routers, print servers, and other devices you plug into a local network to perform specialized tasks run Linux. You can sometimes replace the standard OS with a customized one if you want to add features to the device. The last one is IoT devices. IoT devices relate to creating a network of small devices that can sense physical conditions and control systems. Small microprocessors running a specialized OS monitor data from sensors, such as the temperature, humidity, light, or motion, and use that data to control motors, locks, and switches. The larger controllers, such as Raspberry Pi, often run a stripped-down version of Linux to provide more versatility in applications, such as sending out email alerts for specific sensor conditions. Okay, Linux is a powerful OS that you can use on everything from a cell phone to a supercomputer. At Linux's core is its kernel, which manages the computer's hardware. Linux is a clone of the Unix OS, with which it shares many programs. Linux comes in many varieties, known as distributions, each of which has its own unique flavor. Because of this variety, you can pick a Linux version that best suits your need, based on its ease of use, release cycle, and other unique features. Linux is a popular OS used for embedded systems due to its customizable features and a small size. The same customizable features also make it ideal for large cloud computing environments that support applications distributed around the world. Okay, this chapter ends here. I hope this is informative for you. That would be my pleasure if I hear from you and impatiently waiting for your comments and questions. Good luck.